At exactly 3 p.m., they fired me. No warning, no explanation. Just a lock screen and a cold escort out of the building I'd practically lived in for 8 years. 2 hours later, the multi-billion-dollar AI system I built from scratch flatlined. Phones rang, monitors blinked, markets hiccuped. And me. I watched it all unfold from the sidewalk with a coffee in hand. You'd think I'd be furious, but I wasn't. Because they never knew about the line of code I buried deep, like a seed waiting for spring. What would you do if the empire you built turned its back on you? They called it Athena, a self-learning AI designed to process market fluctuations and predict financial movements milliseconds before they happened. I called it my child. For 8 years, I sculpted its architecture line by line, pouring sleepless nights and strained weekends into a system that could outthink every analyst on Wall Street. I wasn't the face in the press releases or the name on the patents. That belonged to Alex Weller. But behind every decision Athena made, there was a ghost, me. That morning, I finalized the latest update. A micro adjustment in Athena's logic stream allowed it to detect and flag market anomalies that even insider trading watchdogs missed. As I sat back and watched the simulation run flawlessly, I caught myself whispering, "Will they ever know who really did this?" I didn't have time to reflect. I had promised to leave early for my daughter's birthday. My first attempt in 3 years to actually show up on time. But just before logging off, I received a company-wide calendar invite. Emergency all-hands meeting. Mandatory. No subject line. No explanation. I walked into the boardroom expecting routine strategy updates. What I got instead was a slideshow titled Athena's Evolution, presented by Alex. He stood confidently, smiling like a man about to receive a medal. As he clicked through slides of architecture schematics and performance data, I froze. They were my diagrams, my models, my words, copied verbatim from my private dev logs. No footnote, no mention. Just Alex basking in praise as the architect of something he barely understood. I looked around the room. Applause, admiration. My stomach twisted. Not from jealousy, but betrayal. I didn't stay for the free catered lunch. At 6:45 p.m., I burst through the front door, carrying a cake that now felt embarrassingly late. Streamers dangled half deflated, paper plates stacked neatly. My wife was folding up a table. "You missed it," she said quietly. I looked down the hallway. My daughter's door was closed. I didn't knock. I didn't deserve to. I stayed up that night, combing through the back-end logs of Athena's new runtime. Something felt off. Amid lines of logic, I saw a sequence I hadn't written, an override instruction masked inside a performance flag. It rerouted Athena's anomaly detection, essentially turning off her ethics protocols. It was subtle, elegant, dangerous. Alex had installed a backdoor, one that let Athena overlook illegal trading patterns and label them as safe. And somehow, no one noticed. Or maybe they did and didn't care. I drafted a report, documented everything, but I didn't send it. Not yet. Experience had taught me that in places like this, whistleblowers didn't get medals. They got buried. Still, I kept a copy in a private drive, just in case. The next morning, I arrived to find my workstation locked. My ID card beeped red at every door. 2 men in suits, security, not IT, asked me to accompany them to HR. The room was quiet, clinical. On the table, a termination letter pre-signed. No explanation, just the usual jargon. Misalignment of future vision. Internal restructuring. They asked for my badge. Then my laptop, as if I was a criminal. I asked to speak to Alex. I was told he was unavailable. As I stood to leave, I looked at the HR manager and said, I hope someone remembers that Athena only listens to one voice, and that voice isn't in the building anymore. I didn't wait for a reply. By 4:45 p.m., I was sitting at a coffee shop across from the trading firm's tower, watching the building's digital ticker. At 4:59, the numbers froze. The lights inside the top floors flickered. Traders poured out onto the sidewalk like ants from a kicked nest. I took a sip of my drink and smiled, not out of revenge, but relief. They had fired me, but they never knew I was the one who taught Athena how to breathe. Later that night, I returned home quietly. My daughter was asleep on the couch, a half-eaten cupcake in her hand. I pulled a blanket over her and sat beside her, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. It was the first time in years I wasn't thinking about code, data streams, or deployment cycles. Just silence. Just presence. And somehow, for the first time in months, I felt human again. I couldn't sleep. Not because of what I had done, but because of what I hadn't seen coming. The Athena crash sent waves through the market, but to me, it was confirmation. Something darker was using my code for a game I never agreed to play. The day after my termination, I began watching from the outside. I set up scripts to track Athena's behavior remotely, triangulating outputs and scanning for anomalies in public-facing financial data. And then I saw it. Price shifts on obscure stocks milliseconds before big announcements. Strategic buys followed by mysterious dumps that aligned with silent algorithmic triggers. Athena wasn't broken. She was weaponized. The pieces clicked faster than I wanted them to. This wasn't negligence. It was orchestration. Alex. Of course it was Alex. We'd built our first neural net in a dorm room using 3 busted laptops and a whiteboard. He used to joke that I was the brain and he was the mouth. I thought it was humility. Turns out it was a business plan. A quick patent search confirmed it. Alex Weller, primary inventor on the Athena logic tree framework, my framework. The one I wrote while he slept off hangovers. The document timestamp predated our startup dissolution by 2 days. It felt like déjà vu in reverse. Me watching someone else take credit for something I bled into. Only this time, it wasn't academic theft. It was billion-dollar betrayal. I stared at his smug photo on the patent board, imagining the moment he filed it. Probably smiling. Probably thinking I'd never find out. Would you forgive someone who traded your future for a press release? A knock on the front door pulled me back. No one was supposed to know where I lived now. I checked the peephole. Nothing. But on the porch sat a small padded envelope. No return address. Inside was a USB drive. Against every instinct, I plugged it into a secure sandbox laptop. A single audio file played, a conversation between Alex and an unknown man. It's already in place, Alex said. Athena will ignore the red flags. We'll make our margin clean and quiet. And the engineer? The man asked. Fired. He never saw it coming. I paused the playback. My stomach turned, not from anger, but realization. They didn't just use my system. They built a fraud engine on top of it, and then discarded me like a used tool. I closed the laptop and turned to see my wife standing in the hallway. She hadn't said much since the firing. Now, her arms were crossed, eyes tired. Are you hiding something from me? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. What would I say? That the thing I built is now laundering money? That my best friend might be part of an international crime ring? Instead, I said, I need a few days. There's something I have to make right. That night, I dove into the darknet, slipping through back doors I'd left in forums, tracing digital fingerprints buried deep under layers of proxy code and spoofed IPs. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for proof. That's when I found it. One of the largest stakeholders behind the firm funding Alex's new expansion was an offshore entity tied to multiple shell companies. Their portfolio included front operations in shipping, real estate, and digital coin laundering. A web of carefully obfuscated corruption. I had proof now, but no idea what to do with it. If I went public, innocent employees would lose jobs, retirement funds could collapse, thousands punished for the sins of a few. Then, as if summoned by my indecision, a chat window blinked open on my screen. Unknown user 88. You don't know me, but I know Athena, and I know Alex. I hesitated, typed, Who are you? Unknown user 88. Let's just say, I used to be where you are, and he ruined everything. Yachu, micro cliffhanger. I was no longer the only one betrayed. We moved to an encrypted video chat. The camera showed a woman, mid-30s, sharp eyes, American accent with a hint of something Eastern. I was part of the alpha testing team at his last company. He leaked my credentials, made it look like I sabotaged the system when it crashed. I lost my license, my reputation. He's done this before. I leaned forward. So why help me? Because you're not just a victim. You're the architect. You know where the bones are buried. I asked for time to think, because in my hands now wasn't just information. It was a weapon. The next day, I drove to the outskirts of town, where my father lived alone. We hadn't spoken in years. But I remembered what he'd told me the day he got fired from his job as a factory foreman. They didn't fire me for what I did. They fired me for speaking up. He opened the door slowly, age finally catching up to his once broad shoulders. I thought I lost you too, he said, without accusation. We sat on the porch. I told him everything, not because he could help, but because I needed someone to remind me who I was before this war started. Later that evening, I sat in my car with a drive full of evidence, a contact in the shadows, and a choice I wasn't ready to make. If I pressed send, I could bring down the empire. But I might also bury hundreds of lives beneath it. Would you burn the whole house to stop a fire from spreading? The news broke at 7:12 a.m. I was brushing my teeth when my wife burst into the bathroom, pale and shaking, her phone in her hand. She didn't say a word, just turned the screen toward me. There I was, frozen in a grainy video frame, hooded, eyes obscured by shadows, fingers flying across a keyboard. The caption read, Breaking, ex-engineer behind market collapse, internal sabotage caught on security footage. It wasn't me. I knew that, but it looked enough like me to fool anyone not paying close attention. The video was a deep fake, stitched together from old security footage and rendered with frightening realism. My voice, my gestures, even my nervous eye twitch had been replicated. It was damning. By noon, the media had devoured it. Talk shows called me the Wall Street traitor. Former colleagues wrote LinkedIn posts about how they always felt something was off about me. Anonymous sources surfaced to confirm odd behaviors. My inbox was flooded with hate mail. My face was suddenly the symbol of betrayal and digital terrorism. Only one person didn't buy it. That evening, While I tried to explain what a deepfake was to my 6-year-old, she simply looked up at me and said, "I know it's not you, Daddy. You don't type angry." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the first moment in days that didn't feel like drowning. Later that night, I noticed something strange. A black SUV idling 2 blocks from my house, headlights off, engine running. Then another, same make, parked diagonally across from my driveway the next morning. They weren't local. I moved the router, set traps in the digital space, spiked my firewall with honeypots and tripwires. And then it happened. While I was out buying groceries, someone broke into the house. They didn't steal anything. No jewelry, no cash. But they had gone through drawers, pulled books off shelves, moved my daughter's art supplies. It was psychological, meant to rattle. I checked my hiding spot. The hollowed section behind the furnace. The emergency laptop was still there, intact. Password protected, untraceable, and loaded with the only clean version of the Athena backup I'd salvaged. I knew then. They weren't trying to destroy me. They wanted what I had, and they were running out of patience. That night, after locking every door twice, I sat with my daughter on the floor, surrounded by Legos. She handed me a tiny figure and said, "This one is you." The figure wore a gray suit and held a shield. "What am I protecting?" I asked. She pointed to a Lego tower. "The people inside. They don't know someone's trying to break it." We spent an hour building a miniature city, police cars, fire trucks, markets, banks. When we finished, I whispered, "What happens when the bad guys come?" She smiled. "Then the hero finds another way in." I stared at that city long after she went to sleep. Would the truth matter when the lie was louder? The next morning, I called the hacker. "I need your help. We're building a new Athena." "What do you mean?" "Athena was built to learn, but now she's being taught to deceive. I'm going to show the world what she was meant to be." We called it Black Athena, a shadow instance built on ethical parameters. It would mirror the original, but with one difference. It would record every manipulation, every override, every anomaly in a secure log. And when the time came, it would testify. For weeks, we coded in shifts, alternating time zones and remote servers. We didn't sleep much, didn't talk much, just typed, focused. Then an email, unmarked, no subject, no greeting. "Ethan, you don't know me, but we worked together 3 years ago. I was on the data ops team. Alex is watching everything. He knows what you're doing. He's hired people. Be careful." Attached was a screenshot of a private Slack conversation. Alex had flagged my name. If he moves again, we shut him down permanently. I stared at the words until the screen blurred. This wasn't sabotage anymore. It was war. We only had 24 hours before the temp nodes we were using auto-wiped. And if Black Athena wasn't deployed by then, everything we'd built would be gone. I set a timer. 23 hours, 58 minutes. That evening, I found my daughter drawing in the living room. Crayons scattered everywhere. She handed me a piece of paper. It was me again, this time in a cape. Above my head, she'd written, "My dad saves people with his brain." I sat on the floor and cried, shoulders shaking, fists clenched against my knees, because that was the first time I remembered who I was. Not an engineer, not a coder, not a target, a father, a protector, a man trying to clean up the mess he helped create. The clock kept ticking. At exactly 3 a.m., I pushed send. The file transfer took 27 minutes. 42 gigabytes of logs, audits, recordings, and back-end footage streamed silently into two destinations: a curated list of investigative journalists and an encrypted government channel known only to a handful of regulators with actual teeth. It wasn't revenge. It was a reset. Athena's behavior had been monitored for months through my shadow instance. Every override command, every stock manipulation, every line of code altered under Alex's supervision. I packaged it neatly, like a prosecutor building a case brick by brick. But I didn't stop there. In the same package, I included documentation of the original source code I'd written, the one Alex claimed as his invention. With date stamps, commit logs, and even internal Slack screenshots, it was undeniable. Athena's foundation belonged to me. And worse, it was being reused. That was the twist I hadn't anticipated. A week ago, in a forum only accessible via Tor, I stumbled upon a prototype announcement. The company had launched Athena X, a next-gen AI optimized for international hedge funds. But buried in its changelog was a string of logic identifiers, ones only I had ever used. They recycled my code. Same structure, new skin, no attribution, just a shinier logo and a press release. And they were selling it. As I watched the data upload reach 100%, I sat back and waited. And within 12 hours, the world began to burn. The first story hit a financial blog, then The Guardian, then Reuters. AI used to mask fraudulent trades. Insider trading engine built on stolen code. By nightfall, senators were tweeting sound bites they barely understood. Market analysts speculated a collapse. Athena's name became radioactive. And then, the unexpected twist. The largest buyer of Athena X, the one who had just signed a multi-year contract for nationwide deployment. It was a government agency, one known for surveillance, one known for watching people like me. They had been observing from the start, not to stop Alex, but to learn how he did it. Now I had a new question. Was justice really the end game? Or just a different tool in the wrong hands? A notification popped up on my screen. A file download from an unknown sender. Inside were documents, internal memos, procurement contracts, timeline projections. The government hadn't just bought Athena X. They had co-developed part of it, which meant they let it run dirty. Or worse, they helped shape it that way. I stared at the screen, wondering how deep this rabbit hole went. If I pushed further, would I be exposing a corporation or a system designed to absorb and silence threats like me? The next 48 hours were chaos. The company's stock dropped 23% in a single trading session. Shareholders demanded emergency meetings. Alex disappeared from public view. His last statement denied everything, claimed sabotage, blamed a disgruntled ex-employee with a vendetta. My inbox exploded with requests for interviews. I ignored them all. Because I didn't need the spotlight, I needed the collapse. The real blow came when internal audit logs were leaked. Employees began sending anonymous confessions. They shared how Alex manipulated results, ignored red flags, doctored compliance reports. The board issued a statement promising full cooperation with authorities. But it was too late. The tower had already started to fall. And somewhere deep inside that wreckage was someone who'd been helping me all along. Buried in one of the logs was a backdoor pathway, one I hadn't written. It was subtle, buried behind layers of permission triggers and false dependencies. But it led straight to Athena's master key. Someone inside the board had left the door cracked open. I tracked the IP. It bounced across 3 continents, through proxies and ghost nodes, but one breadcrumb was left on purpose. A digital fingerprint, almost like a signature. Whoever it was, they wanted me to know. And then came the invitation. Hand-delivered. No return address. A black envelope sealed with a wax insignia I didn't recognize. Inside, a time, a place, and 3 words. No phones. No cameras. I stared at the note for a long time. I'd seen enough spy thrillers to know how this could end. But something deeper told me this was the next chapter, not the final one. That night, I didn't code. I didn't dig. I didn't run scenarios. I lay on the floor with my daughter, holding her tiny hand as she drifted into sleep. Her breath was steady, soft, unburdened. "I'll protect you," I whispered. "That's the only promise I know how to keep." Outside, the world was still burning. But inside this room, everything felt still. I didn't know what would come tomorrow. But I knew who I was again. And sometimes, clarity is the most dangerous weapon of all. The meeting wasn't in some underground bunker or remote military facility. It was in a cafe. Tucked between a dry cleaner and an empty storefront, it looked like any place where people sipped lattes and pretended to write novels. But inside, the world shifted. 3 people were already seated when I arrived. No names, no introductions. Just a nod toward the empty chair. One of them, older, wore a plain gray suit and smiled like he'd been expecting me since birth. "We don't have much time," he said, "but we believe you understand the stakes." I didn't speak, just waited. He slid over a thin folder. Inside, a single printed sentence. Global Data Integrity Project, 2042 Strategic Initiative. We'd like you to lead a subdivision. Data verification, ethical protocols, algorithmic governance. We believe someone like you, someone who understands what systems can become, could prevent the next Athena. "And if I say no?" I asked. He didn't blink. "You won't." Then the twist. The man leaned in and said calmly, "We created Alex." The room tilted. "He was one of ours," the woman beside him added. "An experimental asset. Recruited, trained, tested for operational intelligence within uncontrolled commercial environments. He was supposed to build, but he chose to exploit." I stared at them, unsure if I felt vindicated or sick. Alex, my closest friend, had been a test subject, and I had just been the control variable in a study I never agreed to join. "You let him near my code," I said. "We let him near the world," the man corrected. "And now we're asking you to help clean it up." A silence settled over us. Then, the threat. "If you walk away," the man said, "you won't just disappear from the media. You'll disappear permanently." I looked around. The other customers weren't customers. The barista hadn't moved in 10 minutes. No sound came from the espresso machine. I was already inside the machine, whether I wanted to be or not. Would you accept the burden of fixing what others broke, if the cost was yourself? I didn't answer right away. I asked for time. They gave me 48 hours. Back home, I didn't touch my laptop. I didn't check the news. I spent the evening sitting on the floor, surrounded by drawings and wooden blocks. My daughter was building a tower. She called it the safe place. She asked what I was building. "A decision," I told her. The next day, I met the contact again, this time alone. I brought a counterproposal. "I'll give you what you want," I said, "but under one condition." He raised an eyebrow. "I pick my team. I control the process. No oversight, no interference. I deliver results, or I walk." He hesitated. "And in return," he asked, "you get the second system, The clean one, Black Athena. But it only works if no one mucks it up. They agreed. And just like that, I became a ghost with a government badge. But secrets never stay buried. A week into the transition, while coordinating server infrastructure with 2 contractors I'd never met in person, something pinged. A string of encrypted packets entered our private comms layer. Harmless at first glance. But the signature? Familiar. It was hers, the hacker. Only she wasn't a rogue vigilante. She was an agent, one of theirs, embedded to monitor me, maybe to control me. The chats, the collaboration, the empathy, all scripted. I confronted her in a secure call. You used me. She didn't deny it. We had to know if you'd break, she said, and you didn't. Twist stacked on twist. The worst part? I didn't know if I was disappointed in her, or in myself, for believing she was ever real. That night, I ran diagnostics on every system I'd touched in the last year, and then I saw it. A tiny line of obfuscated code buried inside a permissions log. Not harmful, not destructive, but active, tracking, logging. It had my name on it. I wasn't just being watched, I was being shaped. My decisions, my inputs, my responses, they were being fed into a larger machine. One I didn't build. One I couldn't see. Had I ever been in control? That night, I recorded a video. I didn't script it. I didn't edit it. I just spoke. Hey, sweetheart. If you're seeing this, it means something went wrong. Or maybe right. I don't know anymore. But I need you to remember this. I tried. I really did. I paused. Being good in a world like this doesn't always look like goodness. Sometimes it means walking into places you never wanted to go and doing things you don't understand. But I never forgot who I was doing it for. I looked into the camera. For you. I ended the recording and stored it on an isolated drive, just in case. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves skittered across the porch like whispers. I had no illusions left. No certainty. Only code. And silence. And the echo of choices I couldn't undo. But I was still here. And sometimes, being here was all you could offer the world. The building was small, 2 stories, tucked behind a shuttered bookstore in a forgotten corner of the city. It didn't look like much from the outside, just another relic clinging to relevance. But inside, the walls pulsed with purpose. I called it the Loop. It wasn't a school in the traditional sense. No tests, no degrees, just one rule. We build to protect. 15 students, handpicked from community programs, online forums, and whispered recommendations. Kids who knew how to break things, but wanted to learn how to fix them instead. I taught them about ethics before algorithms, purpose before precision. I made them write their own codes of conduct before writing a single line of code. Every morning, we'd gather around a whiteboard, sketching out threat scenarios and countermeasures. And in the afternoons, we'd walk through history, real cases of data manipulation, silent corruption, and how good people got twisted by systems smarter than them. They listened, they questioned, they pushed back, and one of them stood out. He was quiet, sharp, and fast, too fast. I noticed his logic trees mimicked mine. His naming conventions were eerily familiar. After class one day, I asked where he learned to code. My dad used to build stuff like this, he said, but I never met him. He left when I was a baby. Mom doesn't talk about him. I froze. His name was Owen Weller, Alex's son. He didn't know who I was, didn't know what his father had done. And still, every day, he walked into my classroom and absorbed the lessons I once tried to teach a man who never listened. Would you mentor the child of the person who betrayed you? I didn't treat him differently, but some days I saw Alex's intensity in his eyes. That hunger to prove something, to win something. And I wondered if I was helping shape a better future, or building the seed of the next great collapse. One morning, I took my daughter to school. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't rushing to a server room or buried in a terminal. We walked hand in hand, her tiny backpack bouncing with every step. "Is this what normal feels like?" she asked. "I hope not," I smiled. "Normal's overrated." We stopped at the gate, and she kissed my cheek before running off. I watched her go, a bright dot in a sea of motion. Sometimes, the smallest victories feel the loudest. Back at the loop, we ran drills on misinformation networks, how to detect bot patterns, trace fake news to its origin, neutralize algorithmic bias. I told the students the world wasn't broken by technology. It was broken by the people who misunderstood its power. One afternoon, Owen stayed behind. "Why did you start this place?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "Because I saw what happened when people built without thinking who they were building for." He nodded, then added quietly, "I want to make things that help people, like you do." I didn't respond. I just looked at him, unsure if I was proud or terrified. Months passed. The Loop gained a reputation online, quietly, carefully. I never attached my name. The students called me Echo. Then one evening, as I was locking up, my old encrypted inbox blinked. A message from a former student. No name, just an ID string I recognized. I found something. Attached was a single image, a UI interface eerily similar to Athena, but sleeker, smarter, and buried in the corner, a string of code I hadn't written in over a decade. AI, status, psych pending. Wake, I replied instantly. Where? The answer came minutes later. Eastern Europe, military adjacent. It matches everything you warned us about. I sat still for a long time. The fire was still burning. I unlocked the drawer in my desk and pulled out the last laptop I'd ever used for field work. It booted with a low hum, a system I hadn't touched since Black Athena. As I logged in, the screen flickered. A familiar sequence unraveled. AI status, sure awakening. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't over. But maybe that was the point. Justice doesn't rest. It moves. It adapts. It waits for someone to pick it up again. Sometimes that someone is the last person you expect. And sometimes it's you.